My name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. In this video we're looking at Studio One, specifically the new things that have come in with version 6. There will obviously be some little bits and pieces broadly about the system, but we'll focus a little bit more on version 6. Now, before we dig in, sometimes people are funny about somebody talking about their favourite DAW. So how I review is that rather than being a master of something by using it for, 48 years, I will look at a thing, and I have looked at Studio One before, and it was one of the things that I recommended in the best beginner DAWs. Their Prime version, I think, is a great place to start, and I think there are a lot of great things about Studio One as well, even though I am a dedicated Reason man. The way I review is that I look at a thing, and a thing in software, in modern software, should largely show how it works, and even though you may not get all the minute details, you should get a sense of how something's going to work. So if something doesn't show itself well, I think it's poorly designed. I think overall, this is very well designed, but just to let people know that they don't need to send me saying something, well, if you've been working with this for 5 million years, you should know. That's not really the way that I work or conducive. We're always working on the assumption that people are coming into this relatively new because that's what a lot of people are doing. So let's have a bit of a look. Here's a quick thing I popped together, mostly to show newish features. So showing buses, we've got the drums with a couple of little bits of processing pulled into a bus. Using the MIDI synth for a bass line. I think it's a fabulous little synth. Doesn't do everything, but what it does very, very nicely. Go a long way with that. Pulled into a rhythm bus, and we've got some processing on that. Not new, but very nicely handled. I think that Studio One is a very nice mixing environment if you like the way it works. I sort of do, sort of don't. Pulled in Reason to see how it's going to behave, so synth coming in from that, very nice. And then of course our gibberish vocal, which is made a lot cooler with a vocoder. The way some of the solo things work there, as you see, I had to solo it and unsolo it and what have you to get it to work. There is probably a logic, but it feels just a tiny bit weird. But a lot of things work pretty well. So we'll start by having a look at their website just to walk through what we're going to cover. This is looking purely at the page of what's new. So it's our most personal upgrade yet. It's a typical DAW speak. We're the coolest of the cool. We're the only place you're going to be able to really unleash your creativity. Yes, they all say the same thing. So they say, yes, they've got these smart templates. Now, I'm not going to really dig into them. I'm not really a template kind of a guy. I have one that when I open Reason, that it looks a certain way and it has a few things in, but I'm not a fan of templates in the way that a lot of people do them. The idea of opening your studio and having your drums and your bass and your guitar and what have you, I can see the logic to sort of say, oh, well, if I'm in the Beatles, when I walk into the studio, I've got John, Paul, George, Ringo, what have you there. But you know what? In reality, when you're in the Beatles, you walk into the studio and John's not there. Paul, rather than having his cool violin bass, he's probably bought him one of those stupid P basses. I mean, God, who'd use one of those? Ringo's going to lob up and he's playing with a Simmons kit because he thinks it's cool. And George, God knows, he might turn up with a Casio rather than... I don't actually know what he played. But get my point that bands are not as static as a template that you're going to have. So my advice is always don't go building templates to say, well, I'm going to do this, because you're going to end up writing formula stuff or you're going to feel trapped. So it's better to, if you template, to merely template things are always going to be there. Like the things that I'm likely to always use in my mastering or finalizing chain, like my limiter with my my clipper so that nothing bad can go out, that's there in my template. Everything else is open so that I can say, where am I going today? But there are templates there, and if you're a template kind of a person, it looks like it's probably good. There is a customization editor. Now, I know people love customization, and they do sell their bag of carrots pretty heavily here. There are certain alterations you can make, like you can choose to add more or less things up here, but it is not the same level of customization as Reaper. But you know what? I largely hate the customization in Reaper. I like the fact that Reason is static. That's the way it is. It's so well designed in the first place, you wouldn't need it any other way. Yes, if you're obsessed with running Reason and trying to make it behave like Fruity Tools or something like that, why are you there? So it's not a bad thing to have this customization option thing, but in terms of coming in and going, oh, well, I need to change my DAW completely around, are you in the right place? Industry-leading lyrics integration. Okay, I haven't gotten into this. Their score looks simple and clean. That's good. When I looked at score, I don't think it's published yet, but with Muse score, and then compared to Reaper, I was a bit like, oh my god. But this looks neat and tidy. But PreSonus do have a pretty reasonable, at least, score thing of their own. So no doubt they are borrowing a certain amount of theirs. But this is saying that we can write our lyrics in here. Brilliant. That's obviously a cool thing if you do such a thing. There is video track. I didn't spend a lot of time with this, but as they say, you can bring in your videos, you can set them to be in the right place. Well, we'd expect that, but now you can actually chop up the video. So I did a little bit of chopping up, and yeah, it seems to work. So you can do some very basic video editing in here. No, this is not going to replace DaVinci Resolve, but if you're doing very basic video editing to go along with your music and what have you, cool. It is cool. If you need to get into doing heavyweight work, learn DaVinci Resolve. Track presets, I am quite opposed to. The idea that we bring in a track and it's always preset to do this, that, and the other is like templates, really. And yes, you can build an argument for them, but more often than not, you are merely saying there is only one way to do this thing. And remember, when you walk into the studios with the Beatles, every time they turn up in the studio, they've probably got some other harebrained idea. And while those harebrained ideas are often really annoying, that's where we get creative results from. You know, they lob up and go, oh, look, I found this little SL, Casio tone thing, and it goes do-dee-do-dee-do-dee-do. And next thing you know, everyone's going da-da-da, I don't love you don't love me. That's not the Beatles. Trio. PreSonus Sphere, license fees and collaborating with others and what have you, yeah, whatever. It's in the professional version. Oh, you can read. Obviously, a certain amount of these things are only in the pro version, the fancy, expensive version. Do you need that version? Not necessarily. There are some things exclusive to the pro version which are nice. You have to work out whether they justify the cost. These things, for me, not, but other people will go, oh, well, the fact that I can collaborate with others is the most cool thing, man. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, because most people are not interested in collaborating, let me tell you that. There's a De-Esser. Very simple, does what it says it's going to do. Vocoder, interesting and cool. They obviously see what's coming with regards to EQs, and they've decided to try and make their inbuilt EQ a little bit of a contender against, well, ProEQ 3, uncreative naming perhaps, but good feature set. Fader flip took me a while to work out what on earth fader flip meant. We'll look at it. It's kind of cool in its own way. Different panning modes, good. Reason has a certain style of panning built in, but it's also got a de-widener built in. And I noticed that most DAWs don't have a stereo de-widener built in, and I think, why on earth not? This gives you 3 different ways to handle pan balance, what have you. Brilliant. Mixed channel overview, great idea, not convinced. Browser favorites and folders, not a massive user of those, but yeah, good on them if they work, brilliant. Updated start page, I don't like start pages, but this is okay. If that's the kind of thing you're looking for, it's okay. I feel, and I always feel this way, that it's a little bit of a layer of wizard. It's like when you ask the computer to do something, and then it pops up a window saying, are you sure you want to do that? And you say yes, and then it pops up another window to say, are you sure, and it's like, and then extra little bits. Send on effects channels. This is good and useful. Side chaining audio input for virtual instruments. Oh, will people get over the obsession with ducking everything? Bass effects and QMix sends locked to link padding to the... Okay, yep, that's good. Those sorts of features are good. Micro view controls. That's where you click something and you'll see that I have an annoyance with it, that you can have some of the functions pop out into the little VST matrix. I think they're solving a problem, but I think they're solving the problem the wrong way, and I don't point to Studio One on that because Reaper does the same thing, and I just think it's solving a problem that this system created, and rather than solving it properly, they're just sort of like, oh, we'll mess about with it. And people who only have this system will see that as being a big win. I use Reason because things are very, very visible in the first place. Track and channel icons. Yes, Logic has had them for like 10 or more years. Reaper's had them for quite some time. They can actually be handy. I do not miss them at all in Reason and wouldn't particularly want them, but I did notice in Reaper, because there is so much color and so much clutter everywhere, it can make it easier to actually have a little icon so that you can see, well, this is a bass, or this is a keyboard, or this is a whatever. I think, again, it's sort of solving a problem that has been created by the system they use, but people are obsessed with that system, so fair enough, you don't have to use it. Positioning events on timelines and what have you. I sort of feel like with a lot of these features, it's what puts me off a lot of doors, but people love it because they go, like, oh, I can right-click and I've got a list of 4,000 things that I can do at this point, and I just think, if it were elegant, we would have made it so that these things were doable right from the beginning. But, that's me. So let's dig in and actually work our way through these features. Looking at, roughly in order of what we've looked at, smart templates. So we've got templates that are built in for various different kinds of features, functions, what have you. Okay, fair enough. Like I said, I'm not a fan, and I think you can do a lot of damage, especially with these ones where they come in and they say, we'll put these instruments in for you. You can build your own logic around it, but be very, very careful that you're not creating a formula out of which you actually start to struggle. The thing is, if you don't really know how to do these basics in your DAW, these templates will make you feel like you know what you're doing whilst actually making you less aware to know what you're doing. What appeals to me more is just that you can set up your own. Okay, great. So long as you set up a simple one, which is just, this is my layout, then I think that is a good thing. So it's a fine option, but just don't let that go to your head of going, well, I can do 90% of my work before I've even started doing my work. It's a bit like, okay, where are we going with this? Remember, true creativity comes from having a blank slate and working out what you're going to do and working with the limits that come up. And sometimes these strange, I'll just do that does come up, which, as I said, is part of being in the Beatles, that they're going to walk in with their annoying harebrained ideas or silly Casios or whatever that lead to different and interesting results. Customization editor. Now, where was that again? View. Browser tabs. Too many things. Oh, customization here. Edit customization. You've got various setups already, but you can run through various things and turn features on and off. So, yeah, okay, great. But it doesn't change. It's not like you can totally reskin. That's probably good in my mind because the total reskin kind of suggests, well, we didn't really know what to do with that in the first place, so we just threw something down because you'll probably work out how to do a proper job. One of the reasons, as I always say, that I love Reason so much is because it's workflow, its interface is so well designed from the beginning, and a lot of that is simplicity. People rubbish it because it appears silly and simple, but that's simply because they haven't worked out that most of the things that you want to do are already there. We don't need to right-click and scroll through 78 different options of sub-menus and what have you. And I'm using this as a vague example to try to find the thing that we wanted to do. You can probably do it pretty elegantly from the beginning. That's a personal choice. A lot of people love this kind of approach, the busy thing. The fact that they've put it here as an update is either going to be meh for people, or they're going to be like, wow, this makes it so much better. So I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. It's just one of those things, but don't see it as being a mark of a great door that suddenly you can make these edits. The lyrics in score, that's pretty cool. You can just come in here and type, and it will put itself in there. That's pretty nice. It's simple and easy to use. As we dig into more complexity, how that goes, I don't know, but their score feels elegant. Obviously not the most complex score editor ever created, but it's simple, it's elegant, and it seems to work. So, bouncing ball. So to some extent you can do your own karaoke kind of thing. Now what was the... No, that's not what I'm looking for. I need to get back my... Call it a console. While I see the sense in that, I also find it annoying. It's just a mixer. Fair enough. That's just some semantics, I guess. Global video track. This one is kind of cool. We can import a video and set it, make some edits, and have it all sync up. Again, it's not going to compete with DaVinci Resolve, but nor does it intend to compete with DaVinci Resolve. Reaper has had some of this sort of functionality for some time, and it's quite common in Reaper groups that you see people trying to really exceed the capability of it. Reaper is a very capable DAW, but it is not DaVinci Resolve or Premiere or whatever other video editing solution that you're looking for. This seems to be very easy to do at least the basic functions. I felt like I was getting the thing I set out to do done quite quickly. You can then set it up and export the whole thing, and as a video with your sound, you can use the sound that's inbuilt in a video. It defaults to muted. So I've got no arguments with that at all. I see that as a pretty positive thing. That is something the Reason does not have. They've never brought video in. This isn't a compare to Reason, but naturally I will always be comparing to that because it's my home. So in terms of is this a good feature? If you don't ever need it, well, what's the point of it? But increasingly we are meddling with video, whether it's for our own songs or for blarfests like this, in which case it's a good thing. It does seem to have been elegantly done. And that's something that generally Studio One or PreSonus are good at doing, in being elegant. Track presets, spoke on them earlier. I just don't dig them. You can put in different types. Now, where were they? Oh yes, load track presets. I do not see these as a good plan. Again, I see these being a danger for a lot of people who will misuse them by think that, oh, well, if I bring in this preset, then it's going to make it easy for me. No. If you're saving a preset based upon something that is just the fundamental start, you know, I've plugged in my guitar and this will get me up to the ability to then go off and do the things that I want to do, that's good. But if it's the, I plug this in and I've got my Eddie Van Halen preset, no, I think you're making a massive mistake. So in terms of the fact that it's there, yeah, sure, why not? I probably wouldn't ever use it, but there may be situations, like I say, you know, if I have somebody come in with a guitar and we often have certain basic settings, yeah, I can see how there is a certain sense in saying we'll do that. But I also see that there's some danger in doing that in that when that other person comes in with their guitar, they plug it in and I go, okay, let's get you, and we'll do a bit of this and a bit of this. Rather than saying there's a perfect way to do it, let's look for those happy accidents where rather than using VST-A, I deliberately or accidentally or whatever grab VST-B to bring things up, and it's like, oh, that's the, George Harrison turning up with his silly bloody Casio on this session and us having a result from that, either within this session or by John Paul going home and going and coming up with an idea for next session. So be careful that you don't use these presets to narrow yourself down, but they're there, so they're not going to get in your way if you don't need them. Collaboration with Sphere, as I said, that's getting into the whole ball of wax about renting your software and having it disappear when you stop renting it. You're going to have to do your own thing on that. Obviously, I'm not a big fan. And the assumption that other people who use your thing are going to be wanting to die to collaborate with you. In my opinion, I have found most people online don't actually want to collaborate. They should. They should be going, okay, let's work together, let's find synergy, let's do cool things. But when it comes to it, they kind of don't want to. So as far as I'm concerned, it's like, yeah, whatever, pointless feature. Not a terrible feature, but pointless. De-Esser. Okay, I did use the De-Esser. Now, I used it in a slightly odd way. I brought in... this is the thing, this annoys me every single time, and it really bugs me. And I know it's one of those things that you sort of get over, but you know what? I single click on this to want to open it to use it, and no, it gives me these little drop downs. Yes, one of those updates that is kind of cool is that a third-party VST, we can use a drop down and look, Hertz delay is showing some of its features. Okay, great if you dig that kind of thing, but it annoys the bejesus out of me. Maybe there's a setting in here. I have to double-click to get this to open. Whatever. Other people aren't going to be bothered by it. I am really bothered by it. But the De-Esser is a new device. What I feel about most of the stock devices within Studio One is that they are functional, but no more. And that's kind of common to a lot of DAWs, that they put these incredibly basic functional things in there. These are fine and elegant in their own way, but they lack that sort of spark of like, oh, it's a De-Esser, but you could do this and this and this with it. And that's something that is nice with Reason, that on the back you open it up and it'll be like, okay, well, we're giving you our CV from the reduction or something or other, and you can fly it out and do things with it. So here we've got a hi-hat. There we go. Not a lot of hi-hat there. Let's pop this out nice and bright. And it's not nice and bright anymore. So let's make sure that we're focused on this. Where is the... Sorry, it's been a little while. Actually, it's not focused on that. Now it is. Oh, that's annoying. All right, so here is our sound. We can put it into listen, solo mode, and then find the frequency that we're looking for. And say, okay, that's the bit I want to chop out. And then look at how much we're chopping out. I just wanted to be brutal just to show it. We can go with very narrow band or a wide band, depending upon how much fun we want to have with hacking things out. Full range or gentle, which is just a less aggressive compression. So it is just a dynamic EQ, single band dynamic EQ. Very functional in the sense that it just does what it does, but there's no spark to in the sense of going, oh, well, I'll use this to do something else. But it does work. I didn't actually try it on vocal. I don't think it was a particularly inspiring vocal to work with, but like all of the Studio One stock devices here, it works, but they just lack pizzazz. which I think is a little bit of a shame. But maybe that's very deliberate to try to get you to update to other things. But I also feel spoilt with reason because their mindset is that their things tend to have ways to do other odd things with them. It's just sort of a personal choice. But the De-Esser de-essers. Vocoder. A vocoder is kind of cool. We'll turn off these things here and we'll pop this into solo. So gibberish lyric. Turn off our send. It's got an internal system or the external system. So if we double click to open this up, we can work internally or externally. And I think it's rather cool. It has a particular sound to it. It feels very old school. It feels very Kraftwerk, rather than one of those modern, let's really pretend that we're an auto-tune kind of things. Some people will love it for that. I kind of do. I prefer a vocoder to be a real vocoder rather than some semi-auto-tuney kind of thing, and so it is pretty cool. With the internal thing, it doesn't move. You just pick your center frequency. You can have it follow, but it's an amp follow. It's not a pitch follow. It's an amp follow, which means that as it gets louder, it goes woo, which is an interesting result. Not always useful, but interesting. But in minor settings, it gives a dynamic to it. So, yeah, not as functional as some others, but they've gone, we're going to give you an interesting feature and then let you do the other stuff elsewhere. So in this, I actually think this is nicer designed than the basic stock things, like the one that look like the De-Esser. But I think maybe they have this concept of two ranges. We've got your bog standard stuff, and then we do your slightly more creative stuff. As a creative vocoder, it sounds good. You can change your envelope stuff. And then you can change your level of each of your bands. You don't seem to have an option to change the number of bands, but it doesn't really matter. So you can change the levels of each of the bands to come up with the kind of results that you want based on the material that you've got. I didn't work out what that was. That turns on these sliders, but with them off, I'm not quite sure what that's about. Obviously, it does something. What it is, I'm not quite sure. Freeze didn't... Oh, that's interesting. That would need to be read about what that's about. They're interesting features. It is a character device, and that I do like. Unvoiced means that it's trying to pick out non-A, I, O, U, and just pick up the glottals and the non-speechy parts of speech, and then to do something with them. So it can replace them with noise, or it can give us the direct original sound to mix back in. Sometimes it will work well, sometimes it will not. So the idea is that it might give us a little bit more clarity. So you mix or just overall final output. Character device doesn't have every feature in the world, but as a vocoder goes, I think it's rather cool. We would just need to read the manuals on it to work out those other things. Remember, my job is not to read the manuals, it's actually to work out how far I can get in a relatively short period of time. But it shows promise, and I think it's pretty cool. It has a nice craft work in kind of sound. Adding back in extra features. Oh, again, that bloody single click. Stop it. Even though this is not an update, this has been around a little while in the higher versions. This is their delay. Anyone who watches me knows that I'm pretty delay obsessed. And I've got to say, I find this slightly disappointing. Compared to the Echo, it's a little bit like, it sounds good. Don't get me wrong there, it sounds good. But I feel like it's lost functionality by trying so hard to be Stranger Things. And that makes me sad. Because in the digital world, we can do whatever we want to do. And then we've got this obsession with recreating stuff from, I don't know, 1984 or whatever we were obsessed with, the Stranger Things thing. And often people end up losing either the beauty of the original thing or the beauty of the original thing coupled with what we could be doing or whatever. I feel like it's not the most functional or cool delay unit that I've used. I don't come away from it. I don't sort of go straight into it going, wow, how cool is that? It does sound good. It's not bad in any way other than I feel like it's a little bit of a PITA to use, which I don't really want to feel like with a delay, especially one that I've spent some more coins to get. The EQ is kind of cool. You can set it up so that it shows us this little doohickey, and you can even edit it here. I would rather kill myself. It is just too tiny to be useful. I remember that with when Sonar first came up with that, and I was using Sonar. I was like, oh my god, that's useless. But we've got this, doesn't resize, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different bands plus our high and low cuts. So that's pretty good. Reason gives us high, low, and our shelves, and a couple in the middle. So this is a bit more than that, but this has a couple of extra features now. It's got dynamics. So you see they're set to jump about. As a level goes over or under or whatever, it will move. That is nice. I would like to see dynamic EQ built into more things, and I think that they've done a pretty nice job. Between this and the matching thing in Bitwig, I would say Bitwig, but if Studio One is the way you've gone, there is absolutely no need to be replacing this in anything resembling any kind of hurry at all. It is a fine EQ. You can see what's going on. Visibility is pretty good. The sound of it's fine because there's nothing wrong with it. And you've got various different options. So as a mix EQ, not as a, get in there and hack and slash, it will do that fairly well, and you can put a couple of instances, but I look at this primarily as a mix EQ, and I think that, yeah, it's a nice improvement. So if you're using the Pro EQ or whatever it was called, if you're using the stock EQ in Studio One and that's your regular thing, then the update will be a nice thing, and you can actually make things visible and not visible if that makes life easier for you. I think it's a good device, and as such, as an update, I think it is a good one, and one of the ones I'm more excited about to see that come through. Again, dynamics. Oh, and you can solo particular bands. So it allows me to say, okay, I want to hear what I'm working with at this particular point. What's this band doing? We should not be working in solo, but there are times where it does make it easier. I use dynamic EQs instead of De-Essers, so that we'll be putting my band into solo, going through, finding the bit where it's and unpleasant, and that tells me that's the bit that I want to hack out. So that's a really good thing. The vocoder and the EQ are really good things. Pan modes, this is interesting. As I said before, I have found quite a lot of DAWs are rather limited on pan modes. They've sort of said, okay, that's it, and yeah, but we live in a digital world, we can do lots of things. Reason has just our balance knob. It's called pan, but it's a balance knob. It just moves everything to one side, which means that, like my hands, things actually get lost as we go. But it's also got a de-widener. It doesn't offer outside of 100%, but we can narrow down. So if I've moved something 50% over, rather than losing half of it off the side, I can actually narrow down like this. So yes, if it was in the center, it would be like this, losing the outsides. But the narrow down a little bit, really helps in a mix. Let's take just our Europa. No, not that one. Easy to say. Oh, well, that's the best. But in the mix, we've got lack of focus. So as you see, I can still left, right, and up, down, including backwards, should you so desire. So by narrowing that down, it allows me to place things in the field so much nicer, and we get a better sense of balance rather than simply having everything fighting out on the edges of stereo. We can say, okay, I'm just going to pop that over a little bit. So we've got the same with the vocal on one side and the synth on the other. Okay, my vocode does sound a little awful because I did ruin it with whatever this was. Let's put it somewhere back close to where it was. That's a bit kinder. So your modes, you can right click. We've got balance, which is just what you're used to, which means that things will disappear off the side. You've got dual, which is what we're looking at. That's what I would want things to default to. We've also got binaural, which means that we can pan things sort of separately. It's a different way of doing things, but I think and you can use binaural for new channels or use dual for new channels. That's good. I don't know, but I would be frustrated if I couldn't set what my default is going to be. If I had to bring one in and then change it every single time, that would be a little annoying, and hopefully they would see that and go, okay, we'll fix that so that I can default that all my pans are dual, because, well, it's the best way of doing it. There's also a way of popping this thing up and making it more cool, or even just changing it. So if you feel like you want to change things around, and I don't know how that works, nor do I care to know how that works, it's one of those ones you'd need to read up on. Again, remember, if a thing shows itself, great. If it doesn't show itself, it's either poorly done or it's just a case of go RTFM. I don't have any argument with that. It's a case of RTFM to find out exactly what makes that special or unique. The fact that it's there, no argument, because if I don't understand it or don't use it, not a problem. But the fact that they have said, okay, we're going to give you a couple of modes, that's good, so long as I can default that without having to make changes every single time. But cool, that is a thing that I missed. The widening or the narrowing down of the stereo field, I think, is a pretty important thing in good mixing practice. So I'm big on that. I would be very happy if I were a Studio One person, because I would have missed and having to bring some other device in to allow me to do that. If there wasn't one sort of automatically in Studio One, I would have built one myself to do just that, and maybe a couple of other features, but it would be annoying because it's not where my pan thing is. So the fact that they've done it, very, very pleased with that. fader flip. And it's like, what on earth is a fader flip? Is it like something we buy when we're at the county fair? But no, there is actually a way to take things that have got sends and flip the fader. Now, what was that? Oh, maybe because that one doesn't have a send. This one has a send. Oh, isn't that terrible? I've forgotten. There was a way to do it. This is largely on me because I spent a little bit of time. Oh, there, flip faders. There is a function key for doing it, but having to remember a million function keys is not always great. It might be nice if there was a slightly easier way to do it, but remember, I'm a little menu averse. I'm not big on key commands, but I'm a little menu averse, so a little button might have been nice, but then it would just be more clutter. So we flip faders to reverb. Now, it took me a bit to really get what this is and why it's interesting and useful. I have complained about doors where the sends like this are a little hard to navigate. You're working sideways and they're just, it's a little harder to see and get a sense of balance on them. Using the flippy fader function, and it's from sends, transforms our level, volume, our level slider into this fader here. So it's taking that fader there and displaying it as though it were this fader. Kind of cool. I think there may have been some physical consoles that did that, but don't get me wrong on that. It is a weakness of this sort of system. In Reason, even though I don't use it that way, in Reason there is a visual knob. So just like an SSL, you can look across the board and go, well, that one's there and that one's there and that one's there, which we miss in this kind of layout. The Pro Tools or whoever did it first, this sort of matrix layout, very, very hard to get a sense. So this is turning our faders into our send levels. And we can then fiddle with our send levels. It'll ignore what doesn't actually have a send happening and set them up and then flip back. So flip's an odd term because it doesn't seem to tell us exactly what it's doing, but then once we understand it, it does make sense. In use, I don't know how I go, but obviously if you've learned the key command, if it's, no, it's not F, and nobody needs to write in to tell me because it doesn't matter. Remember, I'm doing this and I did know it. I think it is a pretty good thing that it allows us to just see a little bit better what's going on. Whether I'd use it, I don't know, but in terms of improving functionality, I think it is a good move and at least a good thing to try to do, to put themselves in a position where it's a more mix-friendly environment. And I do see Studio One as a pretty mix engineer-friendly environment. Whether that makes it a better door for you or not, that's your call, but I do think that that's a real positive about Studio One, and especially little updates like this. Mixer channel overview. Now, this one was interesting, but I think very flawed. The big problem that I have with we'll call it Pro Tools, we'll blame them. This layout of putting all our inserts into little boxes on grids, it's just a name. I can't see squat. I've got dirty LA in here, but I can't see it. Bloody, having to double click. I have to open Windows, but if I want to see what's happening on this one as well, then I've got to kind of, and sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not, and that just annoys the buggery out of me. It really does. Whereas on Reason, because you've got the rack, you can see things so much clearer. Yes, it doesn't work in every situation, especially for VST, but I just feel like I can see things clearer, whereas this layout you can't see anything. While this looks cool, it's not really giving you a lot of help. Yes, Studio One does have this cool thing. So I've got a bus compressor, and it's doing some compressionation to bring my drums and bass together. And because it's one of the inbuilt devices, it's actually showing me its work here. That's sort of cool. A couple of doors do that. I think Studio One possibly does a little nicer than some of the others, the way that they do it, but I still feel mystified, like I can't really look at things. And that's part of the rise of the mixed channel VST and what have you, and I loathe them. So this is trying to solve that problem of being able to say, okay, I can now see what's happening in one go, but you know what? It hasn't really given me anything better than what I had before. Yes, it extracts this, and if we've got our window a little on the tiny side, then we can see our fader a little bit bigger and our pans a little bit clearer. Okay, and we can see some of these things a little bit less cluttered. But guess what? I'm still stuck with my compressionator stuck inside. There is a way to set this so that if you've got this open, if you move to another channel, it'll move from one to another, but then it doesn't. If I move back here, yep, okay, but why has it done that? It's not showing me that. Why? It's inconsistent. Like, why does this now go onto the vocoder? It's like, why not this? And I still can't see what these things are doing. This is what would put me off. I think this EQ is great. It's a nice enough EQ. It's not my favorite, but it's a nice enough EQ. But you know what? When I go to the next channel, there isn't an EQ there, and it makes me mental about all of these Pro Tools style matrix grid things. Is like, why is the EQ not automatically there? And why can't I just go flip, see my EQ, flip, see my EQ, flip, see my EQ? There's something very inconsistent about this. That why are you showing me something in one case and something else in another? I don't understand what's going on. Now, maybe if I RTFM, but I don't think I should need to read the RTFM on a thing that was designed to solve this very problem. It's a little like Cubase have done something similar, but it's a little easier to read. This is something that Ableton did do in that down the bottom of your door, your sequencer, in this slot here, if I click on my MIDI synth, I'm actually seeing the synth, especially if it's an inbuilt, and I'm seeing the EQ here, and I'm seeing the compressor here, and it's visually far closer to, if I just were looking at the rack in front of me, this method, yeah, good on you for doing this, but it hasn't actually improved my visibility of any of these things, especially when I do this and the other thing disappears. I'm a little confused about it. So while I like that they're trying to solve the problem, all I feel like has happened, like if this were my thing, I would feel like you've given me a useless feature that didn't actually solve the problem. And as I flip from one of these to another, I get erratic results. So I don't see this as the win that they tell me that it should be. I'd like it to be a win. I'd like it to solve this problem that puts me off using any DAW that runs this Pro Tools matrix kind of thing. But yeah, good try, but you're nowhere near where I think you should be with that, which I think is pretty sad. You can now, as I said before, send from effect channels. So it is possible for me to send from my reverb channel to somewhere else. Okay, that's cool. A lot of DAWs don't necessarily allow you to do that, or there are caveats on that in that if you do that, it's going to introduce some latency. Didn't read whether this introduces latency or not. The fact that they're pushing it, I would assume that it doesn't, or that it compensates for it. You'd have to RTFM to be 100% sure. I would be disappointed if it didn't handle any latency that it might introduce, because in theory it should be possible for us to send back to ourselves. Actually, no, it doesn't seem to offer the ability to send back to itself, which is a little disappointing. Fully understandable, because there lies Jimi Hendrix territory, but it would create some difficulties. So they've decided, okay, we can do a fair amount of this, but not everything we could in theory do, even if it might turn out nasty. Track icons we spoke about before, yes, you can put them in. I don't know whether they appear on here. I didn't find a way to make them appear on here. I don't think they should need to. They do in Reaper. And it does make it a little easier, but as I say, I think it makes it easier simply because it's such a cluttered environment. I personally probably wouldn't use them, but okay, that's cool. I do have to be fair and say that Reason has built in these track icons from really, really early on. If this happens to have a Thor, there's a picture of Thor there already. So the idea of having to do it manually and use cartoons is a little odd to me when Reason has that facility already. But cool, good on them. You'll like them or you'll not like them. I don't think it's a reason to buy a whole new version of your DAW alone, but if you're going to use them, yep, they're there and they work. Whether you're going to be able to get into adding your own icons is sort of a question to be looked into. They didn't say we could, so for the moment I'm working on the assumption that we don't. I will pop up a picture now of Studio One across my 3 screens that I use. It behaves very well in that situation. So I've got the sequencer one side. I think in that situation I have the mixer in the middle. I normally have the mixer in the middle and the MIDI stuff, which is as clear as it was. No, I don't want that. It's obviously it's as clear as it was when I looked at it as a beginner DAW before. It's a pretty good environment. I still prefer to write in Reason, but that's where I'm comfortable. This, given time, you could get comfortable with. There is nothing against this. I just find it a little busy. But in terms of final words for the whole program, it's in many ways very, very elegant and classy. But the downside of that is that it's a bit busy. Dark interfaces are very popular. I find them very wearing visually. I find them hard to work with. Yes, they look sexy. You see them on somebody's screencast and you go, ooh, sexy DAW. But then in terms of functionality, I find them wearing. They're too contrasty. And so I feel like there's just too much clutter and noise. There are some options in here to change the way the interface works. I didn't luck upon anything that I immediately felt like, oh, now I feel comfortable to work here. But most people want a dark, colourful interface. They feel like it makes them more good on them. That's sort of a personal thing. But overall, it's classy and elegant, but I do just find it too busy. As I was saying, I think this kind of layout, while industry standard in a certain sort of a way, I think it's just an industry mistake that coulda, shoulda had a better solution some time ago. Maybe VST 11 will allow some sort of way of making everything a lot more visual rather than just little boxes with names in them. But until then, it feels like an inelegant way of handling things. But people are so used to it, they probably don't think of that. Interestingly, Studio One straight away sounds great. That's a good and a bad thing in my mind. It's good because you come and you start doing stuff and it sounds wonderful. Does it sound any different? I'm not going to get into it, nor do I want to see people going on about, oh, you do A-Bs and, null tests and it sounds great. Why? How? Don't know, don't care. But it does sound great. I'm a bit brutal about this, and one of the things I also like about Reason is like the NS10 of DAWs. It sounds horrible because it's brutal in its honesty. There's no sort of feeling of, oh, we're going to round off this or that, or however they do it. It just feels as brutal as an NS10. If you've never mixed with an NS10, go for it. They are wonderful as a mix engineer's tool, and I don't mind listening to them, but they are brutal. This feels very nice. Reaper feels nice, bring in Europa from Reason and start, it's like, ooh, that sounds better. This sounds lovely. But in the past, I have felt where the DAW itself makes things sound wonderful, that when I send the mix out and I sit down to listen to it in the lounge, I sort of feel like that doesn't sound like me. I like the fact that Reason is just so horrendously brutal that I've got to work out my own way to make it sound lovely, and you can make it sound as lovely or as horrid as you like. This, I worry, it may have an inbuilt sound. So that's a little like owning a Neve and going, oh, if only I could sound like an SSL. You may sometimes feel like you're a little stuck with whatever the sound is. Not an update, but a feature that is in the Pro is we've got this Mix FX. You may need to put your head close in to hear the difference. That's plain DAW sound, which is nice, as I say. You can then bring in this console sound. And that does sound nice. If you want to know what it's doing, rather than me explaining the whole thing, go back, look at some of the reviews and videos I've done, higher hertz on saturation devices, and I show you real use of them. This is built into Studio One, and I talked about that, I think, in the Softtube one. In that Studio One did get a march on everybody else, and I'm disappointed that Reason did not do this, in the sense that they give you, in the Pro version, the fancy version, the option to turn on this console emulator, and you can buy extra console emulations, and they give you certain things. So there's a saturation thing, a background noise thing, which is off now. Sounds terrible in cans, but in the speakers it just sounds nice. And a little bit of crosstalk as well. And so that is applied on each channel as far as I'm aware. So each one of these is getting some of that, and then across the master bus. And it just does it automatically, rather than me having to insert a saturator here and 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 over here. You just turn on the console thing and it's done all the mathy stuff on the inside. And I think it sounds great. I haven't tried any of the other console options, but that is a nice thing, and I think they have a march on every other DAW for having done that. Kudos to that. It is an instant mix nicener, but it's not a reason to buy Studio One simply to go, oh, it sounds better. It's just like Harry's Mix Bugs that says it's going to sound more like Pro because it's like, oh, this is far better implemented than that. Anyway, there is nothing to stop you in any DAW from insert. Yeah. Watch the videos. I talk about how to do that in various different DAWs, but that is a nice thing about Studio One and something that I think they're ahead of everybody else on. The basic effects are good, as I've said, but just feel a little, just the facts, ma'am. They don't have a pizzazz about them. The analog delay and the chorus, as I said, I feel like they're a little too stuck in Stranger Things thinking, rather than going, how can I make something amazing? They do sound good, there's nothing against them, but I feel like we're just stuck in one spot. I feel like they're a little bit one-trick pony, which is sad in digital. It really is, to me, sad that that should be the case. I did have some issues which I couldn't necessarily replicate after with the channel editor you saw there. That I don't know what that does. I don't know whether that's a bug or poor planning. With the vocoder, I did initially, when I first was setting it up, have something that really felt like a bug in that I couldn't change internal, external source, but every time since it's been fine. So whether it's a bug or what, I don't know. But after that, while I haven't spent a lot of hours in here, every time I've opened this, it has been very stable, with the exception just of this seeming to change the results that I get from situation to situation. But there may be some reason it does that, but it makes no sense to me. I wouldn't want it to do that. Maybe it shows, but then when I go back to here where I've got several things, it's not going back to here. I don't understand. Yes, I can bounce around here, but that to me is a bit of a PITA as well, because I would want to be able to see them all happening. This kind of gives the impression that it's going to let me do that. And maybe if I have this done like this, but that's not human readable. It's not like looking at a person's face and instantly knowing a lot about the person. It's like, so this, again, I just come down to, yeah, congratulations on trying. Sorry, big fail, because it doesn't actually make things any better. It's just more infuriating that you've given me this function that doesn't get me closer to where I would want to be, which is greater visibility. But greater visibility probably means a total redesign of your door. And I understand you've said, let's go with the Pro Fools Cubase kind of approach, because it is a sort of an industry standard. But if I weren't in Reason, I would probably go with Bitwig, because I feel like I can see things so much clearer. But in terms of Studio One, there is a lot to recommend in it. It's got a very high feature set now, even if at times that may seem annoying in the right-click wade through submenus kind of approach to things. But they are there and people like that kind of stuff. I've always, as I said, felt like this is a mix engineer's environment. And if I were buying a new DAW purely for mixing, as in not composing, I could build a reasonable, strong argument for working here, other than the lack of visibility of things. That's what would kill it for me. But in terms of everything else, how it works across multiple monitors, that it is elegant, it feels nicely finished, which, well, some other famous DAWs don't feel as nicely finished. This feels nicely finished. And that's a big thing. You know, you can buy something cheap, but it's probably not nicely finished. Nicely finished helps make things flow smoothly, and in its own way, bearing in mind traditional Pro Tools style DAW approach, this is nicely finished. The updates, that's going to depend to a fair extent on what you do and what you use it for, but I think as DAW updates go, there is a lot in here for more, shall we say, serious users. If you're just laying down some samples and then putting too much compression on them, then maybe none of this stuff makes much difference for you. But if you're at the point where you really are using the DAW quite fully, then I think there's plenty to recommend it, and you will probably have already gone, those are cool features. Obviously, if you're on Sphere, it will have happened already. If you're not, if none of these features appeal to you, then don't do it. But if even a couple of them appeal to you, do it, because it gets you closer to the next version. And because I'm a believer in keeping up to date with your stuff, because sometimes you don't realize the value of a feature until you've used it a little bit, and then you turn around and go, what would life be? Oh my God, I use that so much. I've been like that with Reason. They've said, oh, this feature's coming out in our next, and I've been like, who want that? Some things I've never really used, other things I pull out every now and then, and some things have just really made life so much easier. And I think most of these features are at least with the intent of making life easier. And if you're comfortable with this sort of layout, then this sort of thing, well, yeah, it is a way of, rather than looking at all of these at once and trying to make sense of all this mess, to be able to sort of focus and say, okay, I'm just looking at this one channel at a time. So in that sense, that is a win. But in terms of being able to sort of see inside and look at this clearly, not. But remember, we are constrained to the path they have chosen, which was a very constrained path in the first place. I see why it happened, but I don't see why it should still happen. If you have any questions, ask them on down below. But remember, I'm not a Studio One user as such, but I do recommend it as being a serious contender, especially if you are looking at a first DAW. Their Prime version is free. It has some very hard limits, which might make you go, oh, I'm not going to get anything limited, I want the unlimited. But I think those very hard limits will, if you approach it right, actually force you to work out how to use your tools rather than simply go, oh, well, I need to buy Pro this, that, and the other before I can do the most basic things. Learn to use the very limited tools that are in Prime, and then when you come out, you're going to really move a lot further, a lot faster than those people who go straight to getting the Pro version and then Pro this and Pro that and drown under not knowing how to do any of those things. So I'm a big fan of Prime for its brutal crushing limits, combined with the fact that what you do get is essentially the same as all of this, and this is a little cluttered for my preference, but you can turn these things off to a great extent, and it is elegant and it is very functional. So in that sense, I am a big fan of Studio One, and I think the 6 update, if you're using Studio One seriously, I think the 6 update is actually a good update, and if I were on this path, I would have gotten it straight away. A, because this is what I do, this is my living, and B, because I think that they're all things that are mostly going to get use at one stage or another. The video thing is kind of cool. I've not had video in a DAW like this, so how much I would use it compared to DaVinci Resolve, I don't know. But there are definitely times where I've sort of thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I could just do that in Reason and just, hack here and put that together. And, especially the concept of being able to say, okay, I'll write my music and then I'll make my video at the same time is interesting at least. So Benedict for Higher Hertz. Don't forget there's higherhertz.com with a different channel of information there. Like I said before, if there are any questions, ask them down below, but more broad about this, what I'm talking about, than PreSonus, go try the demo of the thing. Actually, no, sorry, don't, because you can't, because there isn't one, or at least at time of speaking, there isn't one. We were very, very kindly loaned a license for this so that I could do this. It is a limit. The Studio One doesn't actually let you try demos. I guess they're trying to get you on the Sphere treadmill. Make of that what you will. So thank you to, I'm not sure who provided the license, but thank you to whoever did provide the license. It was welcome to be able to get in, and I got the Pro version of everything, so it sort of gave me a pretty broad ability to paddle in the pool, which is nice. No dropouts, no anything. I think that's it. So higherhertz.com, my name's Benedict. I have mentioned a few other videos. If you're watching this video, you're probably in YouTube. Just go to the Higher Hertz thing, look in the video, work your way through. They're a little messy because they're all just on the time of publication, but you can go through and find some things are streamed together, so you'll find 3 or 4 videos all on saturation, say, or 3 or 4 videos all on reverb. We try to stream some things together so that you can find things a little bit later. Go out there, have fun.